Hey, Mayor Larson, just before the meeting starts, just so you note, in the attendees list, you'll note that tribal council member Chris Castleberry is there. I just want to make sure you saw that.
Great, thank you. In fact, I'll ask the IT staff to go ahead and welcome Chris Castleberry as a panelist.
Done.
Welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
All right, the bell tolls for us. Good evening, everybody. It is now 6 o'clock and it is October 25th, and I'll call the Snoqualmie City Council meeting to order. City Clerk, can you please take the roll call?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, welcome to tonight's meeting. Mayor Matt Larson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem James Mayhew.
Here.
Councilmember Cara Christensen. Cara, I think you're on mute. Here. Thank you. Councilmember Brian Holloway.
Here.
Councilmember Bob Jeans.
Here.
Councilmember Matthew Lassay.
Here.
Councilmember Catherine Ross.
Here.
And Councilmember Peggy Shepard.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, I believe all are accounted for, correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. All right, Council may have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented tonight.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any questions, comments? Councilmember Shepard, go ahead. We'll go ahead and remove the warrants.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, with that, there being no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right, motion passes 6-1. All right, moving on to public hearings, presentations, proclamations, and appointments. It is my pleasure tonight to recognize Native American Heritage Month, and I appreciate that Chris Castleberry is here this evening to accept the proclamation on behalf of the Snoqualmie tribe. Give me 2 seconds. I thought oh, here we go. Whereas Native American Heritage Month honors the rich tapestry of Indigenous peoples inextricably woven into the history of this country and celebrates their rich and diverse cultures, traditions, and histories. And whereas Native Americans are descendants of the original Indigenous inhabitants of what is now the United States, and whereas Native American people have made important contributions, have enriched our heritage, and continue to add to all aspects of our society. And whereas our country is blessed by the character and strength exemplified by the Native Americans who have answered the call of service in our armed forces in greater numbers per capita than any other group in the United States. And whereas during the month of November, we honor the Native American peoples and recognize their continued contributions in strengthening the diversity of our society. Now, therefore, I, Matthew R. Larson, Mayor of the City of Snoqualmie, do hereby proclaim November 2021 as Native American Heritage Month in the City of Snoqualmie and encourage all residents to honor and recognize the Indigenous peoples of this land. Approved on this 25th day of October 2021. So again, Chris, thank you for being here tonight to accept this proclamation on behalf of the Snoqualmie tribe, and frankly, all tribes in the state and in our country. You're welcome to say a couple of words if you'd like.
Oh, please. Thank you. And thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for honoring me and the tribe and all Native peoples today and this month. Yeah, it's powerful to be here and to continue to be here. We see our name and our ancestors across the cities, rivers, national forests. We're proud Snoqualmie, and we're proud Native Americans. I'm a tribal veteran myself, Marine Corps, and we do serve this country, and we do protect these lands, and it means a lot to be acknowledged. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. No one's going to be offended if you go and enjoy the rest of your evening. I know things can be quite exciting here, but but thanks again for taking the time out of your evening. All right. With that, also tonight, Council had asked for a confirmation for Joelle Gibson filling in the vacant seat. Last month, Jason Green from the chiropractor up here on Center Boulevard resigned from the EDC, and there's only a few months left. So I'm asking to fill that vacation with Joelle Gibson, who is the owner of the Carousel downtown. I thought that was a great pick. She's joined us this evening. So if I could have a motion and a second for Joelle Gibson to fill position 2, which is recently vacated by Jason Green. Term expires December 31st of this year. But if the council agrees, my recommendation is also to appoint Joelle to fill the unexpired term and an additional 2-year term expiring December 31st, 2023.
Move to approve the appointment the mayor has just made.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second as stated. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this appointment prior to possible action? I think everybody I see from the public has probably been here before. But if you don't recall, there should be a raise hand icon in the bottom in the middle of your screen. If you click on that, you'll get my attention. We'll make sure to get your microphone turned on and have an opportunity to speak. Okay, seeing no one raised their hand. Joelle, would you like an opportunity to speak?
And
There you go.
well, thank you for the opportunity and the appointment, Mayor Larson. I look forward to helping and serve in whatever way I can on this commission. And Nicole just told me about it, I think earlier last week, that it might be an opportunity. So I look forward to reading and learning and gathering information so that I can best serve in whatever capacity you need.
Great. Thank you, Joelle. Really appreciate you being willing to step up and put in some time. I know as a small business owner, you're pretty busy 24/7.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and I continue to enjoy doing business in the city of Snoqualmie. So thank you.
Great. All right, council members, if there's any further discussion, council members, or questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. All right, it's unanimous. Joelle, just want to give you a warning. As you know, Mark Hoffman, our community development director, recently resigned, and we're filling that position. So things might get off to a little bit of a slow start over the next couple of months, but just bear with us and be patient if you could. And but we do want to get your voice engaged in that to make sure we're hearing from our business owners and investors. Thanks again. All right, with that, we'll move on to citizens' comments. At this time, we'll provide an opportunity for citizens to speak to items that are not on the agenda. I do have a bit of a lengthy introduction prior to doing that, but let's see if there's anyone from the public. Most of you kind of know the process and program, but is anyone from the public that would like to speak to any item that's not on the agenda at this time? And if so, just hit the raise hand icon. All right, I'm not seeing anybody from the public raising their hand. So with that, we move on to the consent agenda. All items listed below will be enacted by one motion. Action items include the minutes for the, whoops, I don't have minutes on here. Or someone correct me, maybe my notes missed it, or we're not, are we approving the minutes tonight for the last council meeting or for the special council meeting?
Mr. Mayor, the minutes of the last meeting were not included as part of the agenda packet. They will be included on November 8th.
Okay, and that includes the special meeting as well, I assume?
That's correct.
All right, thank you, Deb.
You're very welcome.
All right, so action items include Agenda Bill 21073, set a public hearing before the City Council for Monday, November 8th, 2021 at 6 p.m. or soon thereafter regarding an annual floodplain management and repetitive loss program. May I have a motion, Council?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as stated. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one's hand go up. Council, any further discussion of the consent agenda? All right, seeing no questions or comments, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. All right, motion passes. And as is council's rules and procedures, we will take up any items that have been pulled off the consent agenda immediately after the consent agenda. So may I have a motion and a second to approve the warrants as presented tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the warrants as presented. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one's hand go up, any council members? I'll ask, go turn to the Mayor Pro Tem or Chair of what is our formal auditing committee, the Finance Administration, Chair of the FNA, Jim Mayhew. Go ahead.
Fellow council members, the listing of claims and warrants is available to all members of the public attached to the council agenda and has been available to all members of the council. It lists the payees and amounts for each claim being paid, as is done at other cities in Washington. The claims listing was distributed prior to the Finance Administration Committee to all council members, and no council members made inquiries about any of the claims that were unanswered as of the end of the FNA committee meeting, or to my knowledge as of now. These claims are the normal routine expenses of the city, including the payroll for city employees. As a reminder, if any council member wishes to pull individual claims from the schedule for separate voting, they may do so. Voting not to approve the entire listing means the city would not pay employees or the many contractors who provide routine services such as maintenance of parks and city facilities. The FNA committee reviewed the listing at our FNA committee meeting and has no outstanding questions and recommends approval of the claims listing.
Sorry, I was muted. Councilmember Shepherd, go ahead.
Okay, so again, I'm still not wanting to approve warrants where I cannot see all of the supporting documents for all the warrants all at one time. So I will be voting no.
All right, any further discussion, council? Councilmember Shepherd, you still have your hand up. Oh, there we go. All right. All right, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay.
No.
All right, motion passes 6-1. Moving on to ordinances. Finance Administration Committee Agenda Bill 21076, ordinance amending the 2011 to 2022 biennial budget. I'm sorry, there's a typo. Ordinance amending the 2021 to 2022 biennial budget, mid-biennial amendment, and providing for severability and effective date. This was introduced, or it was only for introduction tonight. So if you could just read in the summary statement, please.
The intent of this ordinance is to amend the 2021 to 2022 biennial budget to reconcile it with legislation approved by council during the year and to appropriate funds for items not foreseen in the budget ordinance 1241. The city of Snoqualmie is requesting an additional appropriation of $10.86 million, which was supported by $9.16 million in unaccounted for revenue and transfers of $2.27 million in higher than anticipated fund balances to begin the 2021-2022 biennium. Mayor, you are muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Before I move on, Deb, could you please note to correct the typo in the ordinance language to 2021?
So noted, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Again, this is for introduction only tonight. However, at this time, we're any questions from or comments from anyone in the public at this time? All right, see no one raise their hand. Robert, I believe we do have a presentation from the staff, do we not, Robert?
That's correct.
Okay, Councilor Mayhew, did you want to comment before the presentation?
Just a brief comment, fellow council members. The summary statement that I read is potentially slightly confusing to you. That the staff is about to take you through just, I think, what is a fantastic presentation summary of what the items are that are composed of this. When there's discussion here about fund balances, as you'll see, this relates to projects that we've all approved and budgeted for in the past, and the projects didn't get finished in the prior biennium. So all that's happening here is they're asking us to carry forward the amounts we previously appropriated into this biennium so they can go ahead and complete those projects as we had approved. So that some of the language is a little dense because it has to do with how the accounting works in terms of transfers and fund balances coming back and forth. But that's primarily what's going on, as you'll hear from staff. And then, of course, the other big item is the ARPA money. But you will hear from staff, and so I turn it over to them.
I do have a question, Mayor Pro Tem and Mayor, before we get started. We do have, two separate presentations we were going to make. One of them was obviously the explanation to the ordinance itself, but the other one was the mid-biennial review. Would you like, just for process, would you like to be separate, wait for the mid-biennial review till the end of the meeting of the committee of the whole, or do you want to do this before we talk about the details of the ordinance itself?
You were a little garbled there, Robert, but my inclination would be we have a fairly light agenda tonight. So if we can take advantage of tonight to introduce these issues, I think that would be advantageous. But Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to concur, Mayor, and that was the view of the Finance and Administration Committee when we went over this at our committee meeting. We thought that these combined presentations coming together from staff would really help the rest of the council and, of course, anyone watching to really understand what was going on and kind of what the background is. So completely, the F&A committee agrees with you, Mayor, on that view.
All right. So with that, Robert, we'll turn it over to you or Drew to go ahead and kick off the presentation.
Okay. Yeah. If IT could, if you could pull up the PowerPoint presentation I sent you, we can go ahead and get started. Thank you. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what this is, before we get into the ordinance itself, this is just, we're going to talk about what we talked about with Finance Administration Committee last week and the week before, which is the mid-biennial update. So where we're at, where our finances are at, we're going to be focused on governmental funds tonight to show you what the bottom line is. And I know there's been some different information flying out there, so hopefully we can clarify and answer some of your questions as we go along today. So I will pause every so often to answer questions of the council. And so our current conditions, again, recovery from COVID is still underway. We are seeing a strengthening in revenues coming out of it, but we are obviously still feeling the effects of COVID here at the city. Revenues declined about $1.1 million from 2019 to 2020. And there is but there was an offset of a decrease of expenditures of approximately 1 million. So the city did spend less money when those revenues declined. And as you remember, there was a hiring freeze at the time, and under the former administrator Rick Retina, we did reduce spending mid-budget for 2020, and we did lower some of our inclusion of the 2021-22 budget due to the COVID emergency that happened last year. So again, that was the offset of revenue declines. And then the city we've already received $1.9 million in the first tranche of the American Rescue Plan Act funding, and the spending recommendations are forthcoming to council. We have a work group that's going to meet again tomorrow. So we're getting to the final stages of the allocation process, and what you're going to see with Drew's presentation with the budget amendment is the actual appropriation of those funds we've received. Next slide, please. And labor negotiations not finalized for all bargaining units, so that's one of the conditions that's still forthcoming. Facilities, streets, and parks budget just may change. We have the forthcoming public works study that was commissioned by the city council a few months ago. They have recommendations, again, that could impact the budget. At this time, we do not see an impact. The city also has approximately 15% of the budgeted positions in the city were vacant as of 10/19. So again, a lot of this and most of this was impacted by the hiring freeze initiated by the city, and then just the filling of positions over the past year, and especially over the past few months since that hiring freeze has been lifted. And again, this also has to do with some of the vacancies in department head positions like the community development director and the public works director contributing to that total. Overall, city maintenance and service related expenditures are actually lower than previous years. So again, because of the downturn and because of some of the vacancies, we're not spending money. Our spending is less than previous years. Next slide, please. So this is our revised government operating forecast. I'm going to show you two different slides. This is with ARPA funds. So the administration recommendation to council is that we're estimating approximately $3.8 million of ARPA funds. We've already received 1.9 in the first tranche. We'll receive estimated 1.9 in the second tranche next year. For the city share, we've estimated the city would receive, this is inside money. So this is for city programs, not for outside programs, would be about $500,000 a year for the 4 years that we're allowed to spend ARPA money. So in this budget, if you follow me, from 21, 22, 23, and 24, we've added $500,000 each year for ARPA increases, or for that ARPA funds into the general fund. That's each year, 1, 2, 3, and 4, $2 million total. And I'm going to show you some clarifying slides here momentarily. But again, so that does add 500,000 to that total there. So the 17.8 million that we're estimating for 2021 does have the ARPA funds in there. The original forecasted revenues were about 17.5 million in the adopted budget. With the ARPA funds, we're 17.8 million. And again, for next year, for 22, with the ARPA funds, we're looking at 18.9 million. It was 18.1 million was the original estimate. So again, it's ARPA plus an increase in the forecast of some of the other revenue sources that I'm going to talk about on the next slide. But you can also see in 21, I do want to make the emphasis, you can see that we're spending well below our appropriated amounts at this point. So our estimated governmental operations budget, so this is general fund, including parks and streets, as well as community development and all the general operating expenditures of the city. This is not utilities. So this is not water. This is not wastewater. This is not sewer. You could see it's 17.8 million was the revenues that we're expecting. The expenditures is 16.7. So again, there are revenues right now are ahead of our spending. And same thing next year, we're 18.9, but you can see because we're assuming restoration of positions, we're assuming increasing spending coming out of the COVID kind of bottom in 21 or early 21. You can see that that line does increase next year, but again, that is under the revenues. We're estimating 18.9 with 500,000 of that being ARPA funds, but the spending is 18.3. These revenues do assume, so that blue line you're seeing does assume the council approval and adoption of the 1% property tax increase annually. And next slide, please. And so again, revenues are expected to come in at 17.8. That includes 500,000 of ARPA revenues. Revenues over expenditures through 2024. Again, the ARPA revenues were appropriated at 500,000 annually each year, ending in 2024. So again, we're permitted by the Treasury guidelines to spend ARPA funds through 2024. And so that's what we're programming, allocating about 500,000 each year, again, just for city programs. This does not include the money that is going to be programmed or targeted for programs for human services, for outside agencies and outside groups in the community and for businesses. This is just for city funds, $2 million for city funds. The governmental operating expenses, they're projected at, again, 16.7 million. That reflects the impact of the staff vacancies, reduced programs and service levels just because of Again, there was less staff. We had less seasonals this summer, for example, with parks. There's obviously less travel and training than appropriated, significantly less travel. I believe is at 20% of our budget, and our budget was lower than 19, of course, still because we're not traveling yet. So think of services and supplies when you're working from home instead of return to work. All of those contributed to that number, plus the vacancies that were coming in at 16.7 million in 2021. And there's also reduced development activity. So CD is seeing less development activity than it did a year ago at this time. The forecast also does not include potential expenditure increases with ARPA funds. So again, the council could make the decision, or the executive could make the decision to increase ARPA funds for city services, restore some items that were not included, for example, in the 2021 budget. So this forecast does not include those potential expenditure increases, if any. Next slide, please. So here, I just want to back up a moment. So this slide is what the curve would look like without the ARPA funds. So again, if you remember in the first slide I showed you, we had an additional 500,000 each year through 21, 22, 23, and 24 that was attributed directly to ARPA revenues that we've recognized at this city. Without the ARPA the revenues, you can still see that essentially where 21 we see the savings because of all the factors that I outlined on the previous slides. You can see when we get into 22, it's essentially flat. So you go 22, 23, 24 without those ARPA funds, you're essentially flat, and you can see what it does in the long term, where the city still has that structural imbalance that we talked about and the mayor emphasizes for those out years. But you can see the contribution that ARPA is making to shoring up our operating expenses and our operating revenues. Adding that 500,000 each year is making a huge difference because, again, it's pushing that line above the even point that we're with expenditures, meaning if there's any anticipated drop in revenues, say in the future, anything else, maybe an unanticipated expenditure, we have more of a cushion not having to dig in reserves with that ARPA funding than we would without. Without, you would have to immediately go into reserves if you had any kind of emergency spending or anything else unanticipated revenue drop. So again, the ARPA funds are very critical to keeping the city in that solid financial ground. Again, going through the future, but you can see, again, as I mentioned in 2024, that's the last year we recognize the ARPA funds. And again, this chart, just like the previous chart, just does assume council annual approval of the 1% property tax increase. Next slide, please. So again, this is more of a detailed government revenue operating chart. You can see that, again, we're showing the ARPA transfer in right at the top, 21, 22, 23, and 24, 500,000 each. You can see property tax, again, it's slow growth because property tax, you're only growing, this is with the council, assuming council adoption of the 1%. And without the 1%, the only time property tax would grow is if you had an increase in construction or new construction coming into the city. So again, you can see it's very slow those first few years, again, because we're built out, the city is built out. So you can see that property tax does not grow at the rate that the other revenue sources do grow. Sales tax and B&O, we actually came in last year about 3.1 with both of those revenue sources total. So we're about the same this year. Some of those factors, we saw a very interesting trend last year. We saw record online sales within the city. And what was very interesting is the year-over-year sales, well, they were going up. They actually started curving off. So that increase started to soften a bit going into the Christmas season, which is, we have a 2-month lag time. The Christmas season is actually recognized. The December is actually recognized in 2021. So we did see that in Christmas, the online sales, they were still strong, but they weren't going up year to year as strong as they were before. So this is something that we're tracking because as stores reopened up, the leakage that we talk about, where people get in their car and they go to Issaquah, they go to Bellevue and other cities to shop, we started seeing that again. During COVID, when those stores were shut down, there was zero leakage at the city. People were almost all the spending was happening at home and in the community. We saw a huge benefit from it. It really helped us and kind of shielded us from a more significant impact of COVID, where other communities that were more dependent on brick and mortar saw that drop because we had that extra online sales that really did help us through this. What we are seeing, the good news is we are seeing the restaurant sector strengthen. We're seeing one of the lodging properties here strengthen. So we are seeing a rebound. we just received the July numbers a few days ago, about a week ago, and the July numbers did show growth. It did show a rebound for many of the businesses in the city. So it's good news. Again, we're not out of the woods yet, of course, but we do see positive growth with the brick and mortar finally at the city, where we do see the benefits of starting to rebound. Again, there's a lot of questions out there going into the winter. How is it going to look? How are vaccine requirements going to impact the businesses? How are modifications to the way they do business, meaning more outside dining, more permanent structures outside, any impact of that? So there's still a lot of questions, but we are at least seeing the upward trend. And you can see with sales tax, we do see that going up year over year. Again, this is sales and use tax, including B&O. This does not include construction. So construction, again, is, as you remember, it's one time. We set it aside for capital. So this is just operating year to year, the base of the sales tax revenue going up. What we also saw in B&O is we did see an increase last year in B&O. So we saw increased collection activities with the city switching to the File Local online system, and an increase in collections. And so our B&O actually went up in 20 compared to 19. So that was a very good trend. Sales tax is essentially flat. The B&O did see a bit of an increase as we have more businesses, especially businesses that do business in Snoqualmie but are located outside of the city, paying more and having an easier platform to pay their business licenses. And so, in their B&O taxes. And so that revenue source has increased. We continue to see that increase. Utility taxes, you could see it was about 2.4 million. It was like came in 2020. That's projected again at about 257 this year and about 2.7 next year. As you remember, utility tax includes taxes on cable, taxes on gas, taxes on electricity, taxes on solid waste, and also taxes on city-owned utilities. So for example, when we do have the 3% cumulative increase on utilities rates next year for water, sewer, and stormwater, that utility tax does apply to those utilities. And so the total revenue of those utilities are taxed. You will see a bit of a bump due to those increases. You also see increases when Puget Sound energy or consumption goes up. One down factor with utility tax when we're trying to look at the future is this is a strong revenue source. This has, again, really helped the city during COVID. There are several cities in the state that had real trouble getting through COVID because they did not have this revenue source. Like, for example, city of Newcastle. There's some other cities around here that don't have utility tax. The city was, very well protected by having the utility tax as a major revenue source. And again, it's a big driver of the total revenues for general operating of the city, very beneficial to the city. And you can see the impact here where it's 2.5 million in 21, and again, going up to 3 million in 2026. So it is growing each year with external rate increases, internal, and just consumption. So we did see an increase in consumption on the utilities compared to the previous year. We are seeing, again, the trend of cable, people cutting the cord. We're also seeing telephone almost non-existent because landlines are almost gone right now. And cell phone plans, a lot of people are cutting the cord on cell phone plans and just going with more of the pay by minute or pay by data plans, which are taxed in a little bit different way. So you can kind of see where that is kind of the offset. But overall, again, the utility tax is growing, and that's one of our strongest revenue sources at the city. Fines and fees, CD fees are included in this. So this is a more volatile revenue source. You can see where it goes from 2.65 million in 20 down to 2.3 million in 21. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that there is just simply less development activity in 21 than there was in 20. There are more projects going on within the city last year. There are less construction activity, so it did see a little bit of a decline. We're anticipating stronger activity going into the future, so you see that bump up a bit. In addition, we're talking about looking at and evaluating a master fee study of the city, since it's been several years since we actually evaluated our fees for service. So all the fees, again, that includes CD, but that includes police fines, that includes fire inspections, building inspections, and recreation fees as well. And then intergovernmental, including streets. This number looks a little funny maybe compared to the other ones. It's because last year we received a grant, a very substantial grant from Puget Sound Energy to do LED streetlight conversions. And those expenditures were in the streets operation budget in 20. So you can see that we had an increase in revenue, but we also had an increase in expenditures in 20 compared to 21 for streets because of that conversion project. And so you can see that the total revenues we're estimating this year in governmental revenues, about 17.84 million. Next year, about 18.9 million. Next slide, please. So again, I kind of went over this a little bit. The sales tax, again, we're seeing some rebounds. We also receive, so we receive our base 0.85% from the state, plus the 0.1% we receive for the housing, but we set that aside. But we also receive an allocation from the statewide criminal justice sales tax. And actually that sales tax was performing very strongly. It was actually outperforming ours for a while. So we did see a $100,000 increase in the forecast for the criminal justice sales tax. So that did help us, that allocation helped us. We also saw an increase, like I said, the utility tax, and I already talked about the development. Next slide, please. So the governmental expenditure chart, and you can see here with governmental type expenditures where we're estimated. So again, we're estimated well under our forecasted appropriation or original estimate for 21. It's about 16.73 million. You can see that administration departments about 3.67, essentially flat from last year. And again, a lot of that was driven by vacancies. Police, you can see we did fill some of those vacancies. We had more activity in police. So they're about 4.86 million we're estimating. Fire, again, essentially flat from last year. Parks operations was a little bit lower than last year due to some factors. For example, there was a seasonal vacancy in parks. So some of the maintenance did not happen in the summer because there was less one of those activities. So that didn't impact it. And also the parks maintenance contract. There's a smaller maintenance contract right now in place compared to 20. So that did impact that number as well. Streets, I did mention, this is the offset. So again, we had the LED grant that we replaced, I believe it was 80 to 90% of the city streetlights with LED bulbs last year. So you can see 1.3 million, but that was driven, that major expense was those lights. So now we're down to about 916,000 this year. Non-departmental, a little bit more spending. Again, this is just kind of everything that doesn't fit into the other categories. You can see court, public defender, that's going up. We're anticipating we have some cost increases in this. That has gone up a little bit from previous year. It's expected to go slightly up in 22. You can see human services. Again, this is subject to council changes, but right now it's appropriated at 232,000 each year. This is not ARPA funding. This is the funding from general government appropriated by to the Human Services Committee for allocation each year. Community development and general expenditures, you can see that drop that I talked about. We do separate out developer reimbursed expenditures. So you can see there certainly was a decrease in development activity. We're expecting that to go up a bit next year. So we are forecasting that to go about up a little bit next year into the future. There was also vacancies, and there are current vacancies in that department as well. And so again, that drives that total expenditures, which is below our appropriation at 16.7. A side note as well on the expenditures for 2020, as you can see from my revenues, if you could go back to the first slide, if anybody can go back to the first chart, keep going back. This one, I'm sorry. Just to show you, just to illustrate, in 2020, we came in over expenditures. There were no reserves needed to be used in 2020. Our revenues came over expenditures. There was an appropriation for the emergency fund in case we needed to use that during 2020. We used approximately 50,000. We received a FEMA reimbursement for that. But you can see we came in over expenditures last year. We did not dig into revenues, or we did not dig into expenditures or reserves. So again, and that had to do with the cost cutting measures, the hiring freeze, and certain services being suspended last year. So again, we did not dig into reserves. So I just wanted to emphasize that. And again, this year, same thing. You can see 17.8 is our forecast with the ARPA funds. 16.7 was the expenditure forecast for 21. And I'm sorry, if you could go back to slide 8. Excuse me, I believe it's slide. Keep going. And next one, please. So again, the vacancies in the city are driving some of that savings. So that's why it's one-time savings. You can see the increase in the following year. The decrease in development activity, same thing. We're expecting some increases next year. And again, for 2022, we're assuming the filling of vacant positions, resumption of services attached to some of those positions, and increased within appropriated amounts because, again, of filling those positions and the seasonals especially, increased activities in parks and streets. Next slide, please. So again, we're predicting 2000, I know originally a lot of people were hoping that 2021 was the main recovery year. Now we're hoping 2022 is the main recovery year. But again, we're seeing those indicators that that's what's happening right now. We still have the expiration of ARPA funds in 2024. And again, that still shows the structural imbalance with the general governmental fund. So about 300,000, if all expenditures are held constant, our FTE levels are held constant, and all our services in the city ride the natural increases that we built in that I've explained in previous budget sessions and budget workshops and retreats. You can see that when the ARPA funds run out, we're still seeing expenditures over revenues about 300,000 in 2025. So when we get there, there's still that issue that we've talked about. Future forecast anticipates full staffing levels into the future. Like I said, we're budgeted right now at 111.55 FTEs. Next slide, please. And any questions? And I can go back to any slide.
Robert, can you go back to slide 9 and clarify? You said that the parks actuals were lower than the estimates. I don't know if these numbers are transposed or typo, or maybe there's a different explanation due to the, that we didn't hire some seasonals. I thought it was 3 seasonals. But I'm actually showing a number of actual being almost $300,000 higher than the estimated. When just shy of $2 million.
No, that was for 20. So I'm saying for 2021. I'm sorry, I should have clarified. It's 2021. That's under our appropriated estimate. So 2020 was higher than this year.
Gotcha. Okay.
On the expenditure side.
Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah. So thank you. I know you covered a lot of ground there quickly for us, Mr. Hammoud. Appreciate it. I find it extremely helpful that you're using the same slides with the same categories that you used in the budget process in the lead up to the budget and passing the budget. I find this just very easy to help me ground myself in what you're running us through. I wonder if you could just go to that line chart that you have, the one that does not include the ARPA funds.
Yeah, slide 6, I believe.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So I guess my key takeaway from this, as I think from a policy perspective, is we've had a rough 2021 with COVID hitting, and the city administration, the mayor and the staff have done a tremendous amount to respond to the revenues that were going away, trying to maintain service levels, but do it in kind of what you thought was the wisest way, taking advantage of positions that became vacant, trying to avoid layoffs, things like that. And of course, we didn't know ARPA money was coming for a long time. So I think, we can see what happened to expenditures. And of course, we can all see the impact on services as we drive around the city. We feel some of these service impacts. Some of them, I know you all feel more than we do because they're back office, but some of the stuff that's, public facing, we see. Fine, we see that. I think that you guys did a fantastic job of making sure we didn't get into financial trouble. Great. So I think I understand kind of big picture what happened in 2021 and why you think that's coming back in 2022. back to where you expect it to be. So as I kind of look at this from a policy perspective, it seems like as we look out, we've got a little bit of shift in that blue line. So we're a little better off for just a little bit longer than we thought we would be. But in just a couple years, we are indeed facing this same policy level challenge that we have, which is that over time, our revenue sources just don't keep up with our expenditures almost, well, primarily driven by salaries, whether it's our salaries directly of our employees or the salaries paid by our contractors. So we've got this salary going up, what, 3-5% a year, and we've got revenues that are they're constrained at much lower levels than that. Even if we take the 1%, as you point out on property taxes, we just fall behind. So it seems like from a policy perspective, my takeaway is, okay, we maybe have a couple years here before this, we thought we were kind of on the brink now, and now we've got a couple years, but in just a couple years, which my time on the council, a couple years is a blink, we're just facing that same policy. So the timing shifted a bit, but we've got that same inherent challenge that we've got to deal with. Is that a reasonable thing for me to sort of take away as a sort of high level assessment of high level policies? Does that all sort of make sense?
Mayor Pro Tem, that is correct.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry, any other questions or comments at this time? Councilman Ross.
And I think to add to Councilmember Mayhew's point, this past year was very difficult, and reemphasizing that we never had to dip into our reserves or into a rainy day fund, and we balanced the budget. And so I guess that's an important takeaway as we move on. And it looks like we will continue to balance the budget as we have all the previous years. Thank you.
Councilman Mayhew.
Yeah, I completely agree with Councilmember Ross's observation there. I think one might Monday morning quarterback this a bit and say, oh gee, look, the ARPA money came in, you guys kind of cut, you at the city kind of cut services. Look, your expenditures went down farther than they had to. Boy, that's sure easy to say sitting here today, knowing that ARPA money came in and knowing how things have in fact worked out. But, I think the council has established our rainy day reserves for this sort of a situation. We authorized them to be used so that you could cushion the blow. And I think that had a tremendous impact in the city. Remind everyone, cities next, very near us, Issaquah had significant layoffs in public safety across the city because they couldn't wait. They didn't have the reserves that we have that allowed them to do kind of the kind of soft landing, if you will, that we tried to accomplish in the city. So the fact that things worked out the way they did, I think, is a tribute to past councils, to the current council, to the administration, and but I think that the outcome, as Councilmember Ross said, not digging into reserves is just a fantastic outcome for the financial health of our city.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Okay, is this just the operating budget?
You mean general fund or enterprise funds? That
I'm talking about, is this just the operating budget?
Yeah, Robert, I don't believe the capital budget is in here. No. Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, Councilmember Shepherd, this is the operating budget for general governmental. So again, it's all the finance administration, plus community development, plus streets, plus parks. This does not include the utilities.
Will we see the rest of it sometime soon? The rest of the budget?
We'll be doing a capital update in the near future. There's still some projects underway, as you know, in the city. We will be doing a capital budget at a hopefully not too later date. So the answer is yes.
Any other questions or comments this time? Okay, seeing none. Robert, why don't you go ahead and move on? Councilman Say, go ahead.
Sorry, I was a little slow at hitting the hand there. Robert, I just want to clarify that we're not addressing the budget per se in terms of capital, because we do our budget every 2 years, but you are going to have just a summary of update of status. Is that more accurate?
That is correct, yes. And traditionally, just the way we presented before was we've separated the operating and capital just so that the two don't get confused, because as you mentioned, Councilmember Last say, yeah, they're on different timelines.
Okay, seeing no further questions, comments, Robert, go ahead. And you had a second presentation, or Drew?
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead, and Drew's going to present on the appropriation itself.
All right, so we're going to transition back to the biennial budget amendment that we're providing to you, Council, today. The 2021 through 2022 biennial budget was adopted by Ordinance 1241 back in 2020 and has not been amended to date. Therefore, this is really the first budget amendment the administration is bringing forward to Council for the biennium, which means you will see a number of amendment requests covering various areas rolled into this one package. Important notes to make first: the budget amendment, because it is an ordinance, is scheduled for 2 readings, which means it's not scheduled for adoption today, but for the next council meeting. Secondly, because this budget amendment is part of the mid-biennium review, only a simple majority is required to pass the amendment and not a supermajority. Lastly, the administration is preparing for a public hearing on the budget amendment at the next council meeting. With this budget amendment, the administration is requesting an additional appropriation of $10.86 million to account for the passage of legislation, as well as unforeseen expenditures or events that have not yet been recognized. The amendment is intended to cover some smaller housekeeping items, but also major items, such as the recognition and eventual disbursement of local recovery funds provided by the America Rescue Plan Act, the refunding of the 2011 Ltgo bond to take advantage of the lower interest rate environment, the adoption of the amended capital improvement plan back in April, and the approval of a contract to start the enterprise resource planning system replacement project. The additional appropriation would be supported by approximately $9.16 million in unaccounted for revenue and transfers, as well as $2.27 million in higher than anticipated fund balances to begin the 2021 through 2022 biennium across the various funds under consideration. Now, what we mean by fund balances is we started this year with more cash than originally anticipated upon the adoption of the budget last year. Now, in your agenda packet, you will find several exhibits, including the amended budget ordinance, an amendment request table describing the amendments and appropriation increases requested, including the funds or functional classifications impacted, and reconciliation tables that help to reconcile the amendment request table to the ordinance. With that said, I'd like to go through the amendment request table. And so I'm going to share my screen with you. So this is, in essence, the amendment request table. See here. At the top, you'll see a number of columns. You'll see the amendment request name, the amendment description, the departments that's impacted, the funds or functional classifications impacted, the appropriation increases or decreases requested for 2021 and 2022, as well as an offsetting revenue description. And so just to begin with number 1 here, the intent of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee appropriation is to make available the ability of the committee to allocate additional dollars to tourism-related activities or programs. The city is seeing higher than anticipated lodging tax returns, which the administration and committee would recommend putting to use to help the city continue its recovery, while maintaining strong reserves for the future. Right now, the committee is rather limited in how much they can allocate next year, after allocating approximately $80,000 this year, assuming passage of the mid-year allocation agenda bill today. In order to remain within their current biennial budget, the committee can currently allocate up to $40,000 next year. However, the unfunded requests reached nearly $60,000 during the most recent mid-year allocation process, which is equal to the appropriation request before you today. Number 2, you'll find the housing-related services appropriation. The intent of this request is to account for 2 agreements that were paid for out of affordable housing funds approved by council back in May. One was with the Snoqualmie Valley Ministerial Association, otherwise known as Helping Hands, and the other was with the Snoqualmie Valley Shelter Services. The intent of request number 3, the America Rescue Plan Act and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds appropriation, is to account for the local fiscal recovery funds received as provided for by the America Rescue Plan Act, and to make available such funds for distribution internally and externally in accordance with legally compliant eligible uses. Number 4 in the table is the refunding the 2011 Ltgo bond appropriation request. The intent of this request is to account for the refunding of the 2011 Ltgo bond, which is designed to save the city money over time with lower interest payments, much like you would by refinancing a mortgage. Number 5 here is the amended capital improvement plan appropriation request. The goal of this request is to true up the biennial budget with the amended capital improvement plan. If you recall, the amended capital improvement plan was adopted in April of this year, which was after the biennial budget was adopted in November of 2020, which means really that they're currently kind of out of sync with each other. And so the goal of this amendment is to bring them back into sync with each other. The 6th budget amendment request is the Town Center Improvement Project Phase 3 appropriation. The goal of this request is to appropriate funds for the design of the Town Center Improvement Project Phase 3 and recognize the grant received from the Puget Sound Regional Council in the amount of $811,000 or so. Just to make sure, this was also approved in an agenda bill earlier this year, and so you can see that in the description. Number 7 on your list here is the Park Avenue Retina project appropriation. The goal of this request is to appropriate funds to complete the Park Avenue revetment project, of which King County will reimburse the city for a majority. This was also approved this year in June as well as a separate piece of legislation. Number 8 on your list is the vehicle replacement appropriation. The intent of this amendment request is to account for the delay in the delivery and payment of 2 dump trucks due to supply chain issues. The 2 dump trucks were budgeted for the previous budget, the 2019-2020 biennial budget, and council approved the purchases of these 2 dump trucks last year. However, because of the delay, the invoices were not paid until this year. And so really, therefore, in essence, this is intended as a rollover of the budget from last year into this year. Number 9 in this table is the Enterprise Resource Planning System Replacement Project. The intent of this request is to appropriate funds for the ERP project for the recent agreements approved with Tyler Technologies, as well as the agreement approved with Barry, Dunn, McNeil, and Parker to provide project management services. In essence, this amendment request would also incorporate the contribution of non-utility utility sources as part of the funding for this project, which was actually adopted as a part of the amended CIP back in April of this year. And the last on your list here is the risk management appropriation request. The goal of this request is to account for greater than estimated general and property insurance premiums. Because this involves an internal service fund, the city will also need to charge out more or recover more from the various functional classifications and funds. In order to do this, the administration intends to resolve these additional charge outs within each individual functional classification fund by making spending adjustments within the functional classification or fund where necessary. And with that said, that is the end of my presentation, and thank you very much, Council.
All right, any questions or comments, Council? All right, Drew, thank you very much. So moving back to the agenda, as stated, this was, the agenda bill 21076, the ordinance amending the 2021-22 biennial budget was just for introduction night, so that'll be back for possible action on the 8th of November. All right, so moving on to reports. Parks and Public Works Committee, any report?
No report.
Community Development Committee, Agenda Bill 21074, approval of Lodging Tax Advisory Committee recommendations for the 2021 mid-year funding allocations.
Should I go ahead and read it?
Yes, please.
The Lodging Tax Fund Advisory Committee, LTAC, is responsible for requesting, receiving, and evaluating applications requesting funds for tourism-related programs in Snoqualmie, determining eligibility of the applicants, and providing a recommendation of hotel motel tax allocations to the City Council. According to RCW 67.28.1816, Section 2B II, the municipality may choose only recipients from the list of candidates and recommended amounts provided by the local Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. Move to approve Lodging Tax Advisory Committee recommendations for 2021 mid-year funding allocations.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
You're muted, Mayor. You're still muted, Mayor.
Sorry, there's probably a good reason. Give it a couple more dongs. Sorry about that. It's all about timing. All right, I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 21074, as stated by Councilmember Ross. Is there a member of the public that would like to comment aside prior to possible action? I don't see anybody's hands go up. So with that, is there any questions, comments on this item from the council? Councilor Mayhew.
So I know Councilmember Jeans stepped in for us as the liaison to this committee with the departure of Sean. And so Councilmember Jeans, I think you sort of oversaw the process and were pleased with the outcome. Do you have any comments for us?
So the committee met. There was a good bunch of people. The requests were far beyond what we are recommending to you, and we had to be guided by the available funds. So it was a very good compromise where some people got nothing and other people had to compromise it. So I fully recommended the appropriations which went to the Community Development Committee.
All right, seeing no further questions or comments, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. Any other report for Community Development Committee?
I was going to do the SWOT analysis real quick.
Okay. Go ahead.
So there's a great summary in the packet written by Jason Rogers. And also it shows our SWOT scores. And so as you recall, back in February, the council did a SWOT. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat. And it was discussion about Snoqualmie, about our community. And then recently, in late September, we did a SWOT analysis with stakeholders, and there were 27 that participated. And it was from a broad group. And so it included people from different businesses, faith-based community, nonprofit organizations, commission members, such as from Planning Commission, et cetera, some other commissions. So, and so they went through the SWOT analysis as well. So I'll just summarize a couple of from each area. So like the strengths, the City Council and community stakeholders expressed similar sentiments regarding our strengths, such as amenities and tourist attractions like the Northwest Railway Museum, the Snow King Ice Rink, our parks and trails, and just our overall quality of life and natural environment are our strengths. And then the stakeholders also included strong government and partners. There are weaknesses. City Council and stakeholders highlighted affordable housing as a weakness, and both noted transportation as a weakness. And stakeholders identified limited business and real estate, as well as river access to the river as weakness. And council noted a lack of diversity in the tax base. Opportunities. The stakeholders focused on affordable housing as a major opportunity, with transportation, services for families, behavioral health services, and a positive business climate. And the council, we focus on more on tourism, leveraging the UGA, and development opportunities that would not jeopardize the small town feel. And so we felt that because we were talking about the UGA, that perhaps our focus on leveraging the UGA and the stakeholders look at affordable housing actually are similar, where we both agree that we need affordable housing, and most likely it might be in the UGA area. Threats, stakeholders and city council both identified labor supply as a threat, with stakeholders focused on labor shortages more broadly, while the council is focused on lack of housing for local workforce, which has a negative impact on labor force. And also stakeholders talked about COVID-19 pandemic and the SR 18 I-90 interchange. And the council, we talked about the 1% property tax limitation as a threat, requiring the city to look at other revenue sources. Anyway, so from this information, we have our consultant is going to come up with, what are some of the questions that we want out of this, and we'll work with the consultant on these questions. And then we will actually do a community survey. And we just had a discussion with them about an hour ago. And so we're continuing to develop that. And then probably later this month or early December, there'll be a survey that goes out to our residents to participate in this. So any questions regarding this? All right, thank you.
Mayor, you are muted.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, you guys let me get in pretty deep on that before you flag it.
We were kind of seeing how long we could let you go.
All right. Yeah, sorry. Just got a little bit of noise and conversations around the house. I'm trying to minimize interruptions for you guys. Okay, moving on to Finance Administration Committee, Agenda Bill 21075, approve the collective bargaining agreement, or CBA, between the City of Snoqualmie and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 2878.
The City of Snoqualmie recently completed negotiations with the International Association of Firefighters, Local 2878, the IAFF. The resultant collective bargaining agreement, or CBA, if approved by council, will cover a 4-year period from 2022 to 2025. Move to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Snoqualmie and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 2878.
Second.
I think I had a muted second from Councilmember Ross Ortiz. All right, motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 21075, as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to possible action? I don't see any hands going up. So council, any questions or comments about this item, which you did have a chance to review in detail during our last executive session? Councilmember Shepherd.
Yeah, so the contract goes for 4 years, and I was just curious how many other fire departments are putting a specific percentage versus not following the a proportion of what the cost of living is.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I would have to research that question a little bit more to get a more definitive answer. It really depends on the departments. it seems, and in talking with Cabot Dow, our consultant for contract negotiations, he indicated that it seems like there's a push for more agencies to lean towards the CPI language that you see in the out years of this agreement. That's why we narrowed down that floor and ceiling is what we refer to it as, so that we can effectively plan for it moving forward versus just a hard percentage number. But if you'd like a specific answer, like out of the 39 fire departments in the state or in the county, so many have a CPI language, the others so many have a percentage base. I would need to research that to give you an informed answer.
Yeah, I looked at East King County, East Side, was it East Side Fire? Anyway, and it looks like they only have 1 year where they have a specific percentage, and then after that, they're using CPI language. And I noticed that they have a floor where it can't be a negative in case it goes to negative. And so I was just curious about that. Other than that, I think that the contract is in line with their contract.
All right, any other questions, comments, council? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. I'm sorry, I heard some noise. That was not a nay, was it? Did anyone say nay? All right, motion passes unanimously. Any other report for Finance Administration Committee?
No further report.
All right, Public Safety Committee report.
No report.
All right, I'm not aware of any items for committee of the whole. Are there any other announcements or whatnot tonight before we conclude? Oh, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, just a side note to the council, because I know we had a question on the status of all the funds in the city, including the capital. I did send out the Q3 financial report to the council and put that on the website this week, but I did send that out to you this evening on all the funds.
All right, thank you, Robert. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, just really quickly, Mayor, City Clerk Depistrado sent you an email reminding you about the addition of the excusing of Councilmember Lassay from the October 19th meeting. We talked about it last week. That was something that needed to be added to the minutes.
Added for, I'm a little confused for an upcoming or excused of a past meeting or upcoming?
October 19th, it was something the council didn't do. They didn't take an action to excuse Councilmember Lassay.
Oh, that's correct.
October 19th meeting.
That's right. And that was on the 19th, you said?
October 9th, yes, October 19th.
That was the special session I was unable to attend.
Right, yeah, thank you for the reminder. If someone other than Councilmember Lassay perhaps could make that motion and second, I would appreciate it.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second to excuse Councilmember Lassay from the October 19th Snoqualmie City Council meeting as he requested. Is there any discussion? Hearing Councilmember Lassay, go ahead.
Thank you.
You probably don't feel you should be excused.
I'm flattered that I am. I mean, I appreciate you guys taking that, because I wanted to be on that call, but I was unfortunately not able to attend.
I didn't see anything in my Venmo, Matt.
It was a rounding error, Brian.
All right, seeing no further serious discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. All right, motion is carried. Councilor Mayhew, go ahead.
Yeah, fellow council members, I just wanted to give you a brief update on our ad hoc committee working together with the mayor to formulate a legislative agenda for the city. We've had a couple of meetings, very good meetings. We've reached out to a couple of our state legislators, actually all three of them, to get some input from them to help us kind of formulate this well. I expect that over the next week or so, we'll be able to send something out to you. As a reminder, when we send it out to you, we can't sort of debate that or discuss that outside of a public meeting, or we can only do so within the limitations of the OPMA. But the goal would be to let you sort of see where we're headed. and then find a way for you to have some input if you want to do so before we bring something back for discussion. So we'll figure out a way to allow that to happen. And sometime over the next week or so, I think expect to see that in your inboxes with the hope that maybe at our next council meeting, we could perhaps pin that down.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Mayhew. Are there any other questions for or from the staff at this time? Or announcements? All right, seeing no one's hand go up, there being no further business before coming for the council, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Councilor Mayhew.
Sorry, fellow council members, just want to make you aware that during our next 2 council meetings, I will be traveling. And so I may need to ask for your permission to miss the council meetings. I'll be in touch further on that as I sort of get clarity on my availability, but just wanted to give you some awareness of that. Thanks a lot.
Councilor Osei.
We received an email from Kevin Smith at 6:01 p.m. tonight regarding an executive session. I don't see that on the agenda, but I wanted to ask about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I apologize for that. A little overeager.
I think Kevin was providing it just in case there wasn't a call for our need for it, but as I'm not aware. Mark, if you could clarify, there's no need for an executive session tonight, correct?
No, you are correct. And I did send a follow-up email out to the group, just letting them know that there was no planned executive session. But thank you for bringing that up.
I detect a former Boy Scout. Be prepared. I like it.
Thank you.
All right, there being no further business come for the council, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And a motion and a second to adjourn tonight's meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Meeting is unanimously adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of the football game.
Go Hawks.